Hello, friends. I'm Kathy Fay, Executive Director of the Boston Early Music Festival, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special pre-concert talk preparatory to the final concert of our 2023-2024 concert season, featuring the extraordinary vocal ensemble Stile Antico on Friday, April 19th at St. Paul Church in Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. As you know, Stile Antico is one of the most accomplished and sought-after Renaissance vocal ensembles in the world, lauded for their impeccable blend, intonation, and musicianship. The self-directed 12 singers of Stile Antico made their North American debut to great critical acclaim nearly 16 years ago on the June 2009 Boston Early Music Festival. We're so proud to welcome back Stile Antico to the Banff concert stage for this season finale in a program that takes us on a musical journey inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy through Inferno and Purgatory into Paradise itself, featuring works by Renaissance masters Palestrino, Guerrero, Morales, Lassus, and Victoria. It is my honor to introduce our three guests, including two members of Stile Antico, soprano Rebecca Hickey and tenor Jonathan Hanley, as well as Dr. Joseph Gascoigne, credited as the inspiration behind Stile Antico's upcoming concert program, and who has written on Dante as part of a project at the University of York. Rebecca and Jonathan, we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts about this captivating program, and Joseph, we're certainly eager to hear more about your fascinating work. Before I turn the microphone over to the three of you, for those wishing to attend our Friday evening, April 19th performance by Stile Antico, tickets are still available and can be purchased online by visiting the Banff website at bemf.org or by calling the Banff office at 617-661-1812. For those unable to attend our in-person performance on April 19th, virtual tickets are on sale as well. Our virtual presentation premieres on Friday, May 3rd, and will be available for viewing for a 2-week period through and including Friday, May 17th. I should also mention that if you'd like to learn more about the upcoming concert by Stile Antico, you'll find the concert program, fascinating program notes, and the complete texts and translations on the Banff website, again, at bemf.org. Finally, my heartfelt thanks to David Halstead and Jay Santos for their leadership support of the April 19th performance by Stile Antico, and to Andrew Siegel for his generous support of the virtual presentation by Stile Antico. All of us at Banff are so grateful to David, Jay, and Andrew, as well as our many friends and fans around the world who attend and support our in-person and virtual performances. If you'd like to learn more about our concert sponsorships, please visit the Banff website at bemf.org. So with that, I will now disappear from the screen and turn the discussion over to the three of you. My thanks to all of you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you at the concert on Friday, April 19th.
Well, thank you, Kathy. We're really looking forward to coming to Boston again. We're currently in New York. We landed last night, or yesterday afternoon, and we've got a few concerts in the States before we arrive in Boston. But yeah, can't wait. And thank you so much for inviting us back again. So as you said, we have this program that's inspired by Dante, and it was actually sort of also inspired by Joseph, who is my partner, and who during lockdown got really interested in Dante's Divine Comedy, and we had lots of conversations about this, and it occurred to me that it'd be a fantastic hook for a Stile Antico program, because it tells all of these stories. It's a classic tale of triumph of light over darkness, life over death. It's a love story. It's a pilgrimage. It follows the story of the Easter Triduum, so from Maundy Thursday to Easter Day. It's got so many layers, and I thought that would be a really interesting thing to explore. So I started getting thinking about all of the ways that we can explore how music in the Divine Comedy could tell this story. And of course, there's been so much work written about it because it's such an important piece of literature, not only in Italy but in the world. And so it was really fascinating to try and put together a program which would have some really fantastic music, maybe some unknown pieces as well, and also to tell this story as best we can in music and in reading as well. And I think we're fairly happy with what we've come up with. It's a really fun program, I think, and something slightly different to what we usually do. So it's called A Divine Hope, and one of the reasons I think it's a really interesting story is that it's all about hope prevailing. And so, as I said, the inspiration was Joseph's work. Well, interest in Dante, and then his work at the University of York, as Kathy said, working on a project that was actually to do with global development and hope, but he put his spin on it with Dante. And Joseph, I wonder whether you just talk a bit about that project and then also about hope in Dante's Divine Comedy.
Yes, for sure, absolutely. So that project at the University of York, as you say, was sponsored by the Interdisciplinary Development Centre, and it was led by Indrajit Roy, who has written about the idea of hope in citizenship, in state formation, etc. And as you say, I wrote several pieces for it and put my Dantean spin on it by looking at the idea of hope in the Divine Comedy, both in the Inferno and then going through Purgatory all the way up to heaven. And so I wrote several pieces on that theme. And it's something that I've been quite interested in, as you say, for over a year now, thinking about hope and the place of hope in Dante's writing and what it would have meant to Christians in the 14th century when he wrote, and also what it means to just general human beings and readers of Dante today.
I suppose everybody knows that quote, from the gates of hell, saying, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." So I think what I think is quite nice about this program is we have focused on hope, the fact that there is an existence of hope, and it becomes more and more obvious as you go through from the beginning of hell all the way up to heaven.
Yes, absolutely, Rebecca. And as you say, everybody, well, a lot of people, if they know anything about Dante or the Divine Comedy, it is that phrase, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter in." It's a very iconic phrase. It's one of the most well-known lines from medieval literature, I would argue. But as you say, it's almost ironic because actually, while the absence of hope does in many ways define hell, and we can talk about that a little bit if you like, I would argue, and I have argued, that the Purgatory and certainly Paradise, so the 2/3 of the Divine Comedy, are actually defined by the presence of hope and the expression of hope in a very Christian definition of hope, which for Dante was belief in salvation. And again, we can talk more about that. But yeah, the abandoning hope comes right at the very beginning of the Divine Comedy as he goes through the gate into hell and begins his journey, as Jonathan said, on Maundy Thursday, going into Good Friday.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because not only is there no hope in hell, but actually there's no music in hell either. There's lots of music that Dante hears being sung in Purgatory and in heaven, but actually all he hears in hell is like sort of horrible sounds, wailing and weeping and people clapping. And so I guess there's a kind of a nice link there that, in a place without hope, there is also no music. And so sort of music equals hope in a nice way.
I don't
Yes,
know.
absolutely.
Maybe, sorry.
No, you go.
I was just going to say maybe Joseph can tell us. I mean, the fact that each chapter of the Divine Comedy is called a canto, which is obviously meaning about singing. How is that relevant, do you think? And even though we're saying in hell there's no singing and no music, the fact that he's called them cantos, is that a common thing in poetry of that era, or was it a very Dantean thing?
Great question. I think really that was a classical poetry thing. Yeah. So Dante saw himself very much being a modest man. He saw himself in part of a strain of, there was Homer, there was Virgil, and then there was Dante. And certainly Homer and Virgil, these classical ancient Greek and then ancient Roman poets, did view their work as music almost. They always invoked the muses of song, and they refer to their poems, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, as songs. I think that's the sort of classical art tradition which Dante wanted to maintain. Yeah. And
Yeah, I just
also
remembered today actually, because I studied Latin and I studied the Aeneid, and I remember the very first line of the Aeneid is "I sing of arms and men," isn't, or the
Yes.
band, whatever it is. So I suddenly remembered that. I was like, oh yes, so probably Dante
Yeah.
was inspired by that.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. And the Odyssey is the same. He says, sing to me, muse of the dot dot dot. And then Dante, in I think one or two canto, he does invoke the muses in the exact same way. So I think that's why he refers to them as songs. But certainly Jonathan's right to say there is no music really in hell. And it is a place devoid of any sense of time or movement, both of which you need for to sing or to play an instrument. And I think it's really noticeable when you read the text, especially comparing it to Purgatory. When he gets to Purgatory, one of the first things he hears or sees is a choir singing a song on a ship as they arrive. And so the contrast he really does hammer home, especially because the only thing he does hear in hell, as Jonathan said, is the wailing and the screaming and the crying of the tormented and woeful souls. So on the one hand, you have this this childlike, terrified wailing, contrasted with some of the most beautiful structured music, because music requires thought, it requires will, it requires emotion. All of those don't really exist in hell. Hell is a space without time, without free will, and in many ways without rationality. People are in hell because they obeyed their base instincts. They sort of gave up their divine rationality. And so therefore they cannot sing. They can't sing even if they wanted to. They could not sing. Unlike in Purgatory, and certainly unlike in heaven, where the singing is pretty relentless.
Of course, this is a bit of a problem when we were trying to put together a program with music, which would be about hell. So, but we have this amazing madrigal from Luzzasco Luzzaschi, who's in fact actually one of 6 Italian madrigalists who set this exact bit of text from Dante's Inferno about the sounds that he hears. So it's called Quivi sospiri ed alti guai, and it's really amazing. This madrigal. Becky, you don't sing in it, do you?
No, yes,
so you're always listening, but I'm in it, and it's very bizarre to sort of to work your way around. But it's quite interesting that there was this fascination in the latter half of the 16th century with Dante, and I think that's one thing that why it's also really really good to focus on it is because it was an important work in the Renaissance as well. There was this sort of renewal of Dantean interest in the 16th century. So it shows how it's been important throughout its history. But yes, this madrigal is certainly something to listen out for in the program. It's really good fun to sing, and it's got lots of very strange chord changes and some fantastic word painting.
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary. And certainly that was a new piece on us, wasn't it? I'd not heard of the composer before, I have to admit. So yeah, that's what's been nice about this program. There's some well-known composers in there, but there's some quite unusual things as well. So it's been great for us to discover, to be honest. So maybe we should now talk through what we've chosen for each section, each of the hell, purgatory, heaven sections.
Yeah.
And Jonathan you've put together the program, so you know a lot about why particular pieces were chosen, and some of them it is fairly obvious, because we haven't mentioned that during the concert we interspersed the music with readings from Inferno by members of the group, which then put the following pieces into context. But the opening piece of the whole program is sort of inspired by the very first opening line, or the very first line of the whole commedia, which is it's nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, isn't it? In the middle of our life. So that obviously led us to think about the sort of Christian setting of media vita, but in the midst of life we are in death. So that's our opening piece, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a really beautiful piece of gombe. It's all very low set. Becky has to sing an alto part, even though she's a soprano. But it sort of has this sort of emerging quality to it. You start off really low, and it ends on a sort of, I don't know. It's not hopeful or it's sort of unfinished way, isn't it? And I think it really nicely sets the story up.
Yeah, that's why I think it's really fitting, actually. We've done this programme quite a few times now. We've all really grown to love it, and it's been very popular with audiences as well. But I think what's great about this opening piece, it has a sort of sense of uncertainty about it, and it's a bit unsettled. Just like, at the very beginning, Dante is like, I didn't know where I was. I woke up in this wood, didn't know what was going on. And there's definitely a sense of that slightly wandering on unknown paths in the Gombe, I think.
Yeah. One of my favourite piece possibly in the whole program is the end of the Inferno set, which is a piece by Guerrero, Vexilla Regis, and this is in the program because when Dante actually meets Satan in hell, Virgil says to him, "Behold," well, what does he say? The banners of the infernal king advance forward, which is a corruption of the Christian hymn Vexilla Regis Prodeunt. Is that right, Joseph?
Yes, I'd say so. Yeah, so it's a sort of a perverted pun, if you like, as you say, a play on this quite, what I would have assumed, quite well known phrase and hymn. And yeah, Virgil sort of twists it to describe, the infernal king, as you say, Satan himself, with his wings spread out like horrible banners. Yeah.
And weirdly, he's bound in ice, not fire, which is, I think, I always think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the the iconic pictures of hell are usually, it's flames licking at feet and boiling pits of lava. Whereas Dante's hell is predominantly a cold place. The further down you get, the colder and colder and colder it gets, until right at the very pit, at the very center of the earth, is just a lake Cocytus, which is sort of fed by Satan's never-ending tears, and these wings, these infernal banners. The wind that they produce freezes the lake, and so he's sort of trapped up to his waist. And then some of the most, awful characters in history are buried in the ice, or either completely, or some of them have just got their head out so they can sort of gnash and gnaw at each other. But it's quite a good. I think it's very. It sort of evokes this Dantean idea that through sin, you lose free will and you become, a complete servant to your base instincts. So you sort of abandon free will, this gift of God, up to the point where you can't even move. You're trapped in ice. That's not to say that there aren't some hot bits of hell. There is a few places where it's raining fire in some places. Some people are in boiling pits of tar, which must have been quite toasty.
Horrible.
But yeah, overall, it's a pretty place.
But I suppose also, so this Guerrero piece describes Christ on the cross, and I suppose he's similarly in this like fixed position, like almost like Satan bound in ice. Christ is bound on the cross. So there's an interesting parallel, I think, between what they're describing. But the most beautiful thing about it is that it's all built on this plain song, which I suppose is very ancient, and because the plain song goes, the first phrase sort of completely descends and the second rises, the whole piece sort of has this wonderful like wave quality. I think you get these whole flowing sections where everyone is cascading over one another down the scale and then up again. And there's a bit where then the second thing is really, really high and everyone's sort of just singing out. And I just think he writes it so well on the plain song. And I think it's really beautiful. I've always wanted to sing it with Stile since I joined. It's one piece I've wanted to do. So I'm really glad we managed to get it in.
Oh, it's a really great piece, and that concludes our hell set. But also, we haven't mentioned, there's a really fantastic piece of Palestrina in that set too, called Peccantem me quotidie. I have sinned every day, and it's a really sort of wallowing in sin kind of thing. I think there's even a bit when it sings about going into hell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we found it's a really fantastic setting. I think one of Palestrina's best pieces that I've sung, and that's been a lovely thing to discover.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in the Phrygian mode, which is sort of usually reserved for these sort of dark and miserable things. But sometimes it feels more like Victoria than Palestrina, doesn't it? It's got much more juice in it than
it really has. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of passionate kind of feeling behind it.
So I guess we finish the Guerrero and we enter Purgatory. And I think one interesting thing about Purgatory is that in the music that we've chosen, but I think it must just be because of the text as well that Dante hears, there's so much plain song. and one thing that we probably would have included if we had time is the in exitu Israel, which is one thing that Dante hears a lot throughout his Purgatory, and that's tonus peregrinus, the da 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 dee dum, which you'll hear in, if you go and hear Allegri Miserere, you'll hear that as well. And I think that's a really interesting thing because it feels very churchy in a way immediately, but also very beseeching and prayerful, and I guess that's the whole point of Purgatory, isn't it? That we're asking for to be cleansed and for redemption for our sins.
Yes, I suppose so. And I think that piece he does say he hears when he's on the shores of Purgatory, I think, it's right at the beginning, and there's like a new boatload of Purgatory people coming and arriving and singing that. So yeah, as you say, this sort of beseeching, praying, invoking, wanting forgiveness of that piece is really, quite apposite, and it's quite obvious that one would have chosen that, I suppose. Because yes, you're right, Purgatory is a place of, to purge sins, but rather than a place of, torment and punishment, it's very much a place in Dante's world of contemplation, reflection, and trying consciously to make yourself worthy to ascend into heaven, which is why I argue that it is a place defined by the presence of hope, just as hell is a place defined by the absence of hope, because these people, the people he meets in Purgatory, know that one day they are going to eventually get into heaven. It's just a matter of time, and time, to use in reflection, in prayer, and quite frequently in song. So I think each cornice that he goes through at least has a song or a chant or some kind of prayer that he mentions that each one are singing.
Yes, that's why so this section has been quite easy to choose music for in a way. In fact, it's almost been difficult to know what not to put in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we sort of had to pick and choose a little bit. So as well as the Victoria, there's also the Palestrina Salve Regina in 5 parts, which is, I think, a really stunning setting of it. And is the Salve Regina also heard in Purgatory as they go along?
That's right, yeah. And I think in the text it describes Mary as our hope, our only hope, doesn't it? Spes Nostra, and it's kind of it starts to introduce this idea about how you can pray to the Virgin and use this hope in Purgatory. Yeah, but it is a fantastic. I mean, I don't think there's a bad setting of the Salve Regina. It's such an incredible text. This amazing thing. But the Palestrina is particularly good, I think. And then finally, in the first half, we have so when Dante reaches Mount Purgatory, he hears the Te Deum being sung, and this was a really difficult one because there's not very many short enough settings of the Te Deum to perform. So we actually just take the very last bit, which is O Lord, save thy people and bless thine heritage. So it's usually, actually, it's often admitted if you go to an English service of evensong, matins, you might not hear this final bit being sung. But it sort of matches the character, I think, of Purgatory much better. And this is by Claudio Merulo, who is, I think, Monteverdi's predecessor at St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. And it's for 12 voices, which is perfect for us because we've got 12 voices, although Nathan has to sing some very low notes because I think probably there would have been some instruments used at the time as well.
It's got a very big range, isn't it? There's Helena, kind of star soprano, is sitting on top Gs, and then Nathan is down in the depths as well. So it uses the whole range of human voices, really.
And then we start the second half with it's a sort of little vignette dedicated to Beatrice, because I said at the beginning that this is a love story as well. Dante's journey is spurred on by his wanting to be saved and to find Beatrice, or Beatrice, his lover, and she sends Virgil to sort of guide him along. Is that right, Joseph?
Yes, so Beatrice, his muse, his love, etc., is in heaven. She's died, unfortunately, and she knows that deep down on earth he's lost his way. He's in this dark wood. He's probably sinning and doing all sorts of bad things, and so she invokes Mary, who then invokes St. Lucy, I think, who then invoke Virgil to go and rescue him, because he's in hell. He's sort of halfway in the earth anyway, so he can go and find him and save him and bring him all the way through Purgatory, and then right at the top, in the Garden of Eden, he finally meets Beatrice again, and then Virgil disappears, which is very sad. But yes, after he meets Beatrice, he's sort of semi-saved, I suppose, and ready to go up into heaven.
Because in La Vita Nuova, which is the other work that Dante is best known for, he describes Beatrice in that, doesn't he? And she's a sort of virginal Marian figure in that poetry as well, isn't she? So I guess she's, as well as being her love interest, she's a sort of metaphor in almost for the Virgin Mary, would you say?
Yes. So his first great work was La Vita Nuova, the New Life. This collection of prose and poetry, which is all dedicated to Beatrice and to love. Which he usually talks about as if it was an actual person, or maybe like a deity. Almost quite sacrilegiously, you would kind of think for a Christian of that period. And there is a bit of debate, and people can argue: is Beatrice a symbol or a metaphor for Mary, or does he more use Mary as a metaphor for love and for Beatrice? One would be very Christian and theological, and I suppose the other arguably would be very human, very almost primitive. And I do prefer the latter. I prefer the idea that he is completely in love and in awe of this person. And even, the Virgin Mary, what was almost not sufficient, or, she was the only thing that was good enough to be a metaphor for his love of Beatrice. But ultimately, the Divine Comedy itself is just a journey to Beatrice and to understand her completely, as much as it is a journey to understand God and heaven. I suppose you can't do one without the other, Dante might argue.
So we have this setting of the Agnus Dei, which appropriately enough is based on it's a Morales setting, which is based on a Josquin chanson, which was the favorite of Charles V, I think, which is Mille Regrets, 1,000 regrets at leaving you, and so that's kind of a nice opener into this little time when we think about Beatrice in the journey, because in the next piece is another setting from the Bible that he hears throughout Purgatory, which is the Beatitudes, which surely they echo Beatrice's name, which so you imagine that it's something that he's just referencing the whole time. But this is quite of a weird little piece by Lassus, isn't it? The Beatitudes.
Yeah, in fact, I'm afraid we don't sing the whole piece either, because it's really quite long, so we cut it off halfway through. But yeah, it's just in 4 parts, and I think he really does try to illustrate each of the Beatitudes. There's quite a lot of sort of word painting in there, particularly the bit where it's Beati qui lugent, that morning section is, I think really quite evocative. But it is quite unusual, actually. I also find Lassus is quite difficult to get to grips with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. We've just done an Easter program where one of the pieces by Lassus, I'm not sure I know what's going on at all. It's very difficult. But anyway, I think the Beatitudes is actually quite useful because he's got so much imagery that makes sense. We've got lots of things that we can find in that piece, and it is really beautiful. Yeah, and then the final piece in the Purgatory set is the Asperges May by Morales again, isn't it? So Dante's washed in the river Lethe. I suppose it's sort of like a cleansing sins, maybe even a bit of baptism imagery as well, or rebirth, I suppose, by these 4 maidens. Gareth has to do a reading about maidens washing him and coming out dripping wet, doesn't he?
We all laugh. But it's actually it's a really beautiful passage, isn't it?
Yeah, and
it's
really beautiful.
Gorgeous in the poem. Yeah, it's gorgeous in the poem, and almost slightly profane. With you could almost read innuendo into the
exactly
being led into the water with some lovely maidens. But the idea of a baptism is perhaps much more appropriate and suitable. But yes, this piece is absolutely gorgeous with the the idea of the cleansing and the purification, and rebirth almost, I suppose.
So it definitely prepares us well for heaven, which we then move on to in the programme. And we sing a really fun, is it a 14th century, 13th century anonymous sort of chant called Venetia Laudere, which is all about come and praise the Virgin, isn't it? And it's we're normally singing it in quite a sort of I would say bawdy, that's not quite right, but a kind of more rustic way than a lot of the other pieces in the programme.
I guess it's something that Dante might even have known and heard, because it would have been sung in Florence at the time, and it's the sort of thing that would have been, I think they're called lauda, these things, and they would have been sung throughout the streets on a feast day, or as sort of part of a popular devotion in the city. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to think this is the sort of music that Dante might have heard and might have imagined when he wrote about music in the Divine Comedy as well. About it's just a single line, I guess a bit like plain chant, but a more sort of popular and less churchy way of doing it, and it's in Italian as well. But yeah, it's quite interesting to think that's the sort of thing that he might be imagining as he goes on his journey.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to think that, he might have heard this and, based some of his ideas on this sort of music, and this is what he would have imagined heaven to sound like, especially, considering he was writing in 1300. And, what kind of people would have known this music as well? Like you say, it's more popular music, and they might have sung it in the streets, and it's in Italian. Do you think this would have been, the equivalent of popular music today? Would people have known this, normal, dare I say, Italians?
I don't know. I guess the big thing is that it would have been sung by the laity rather than probably by monks or priests. So crucially, it might have been sung by women, which is a big thing as well. And I think, yeah, I wonder whether it's this. I mean, we always feel like once we've sung it, we want the final verse. We want the audience to join in, because you've sung it so many times. It's a really easy thing to pick up, isn't it? And I guess a bit like a pop song or anything which has a repeating refrain. You by the end of it, you can pick it up and join in that way.
Maybe we should introduce some audience participation in that one.
Yeah, it'd be quite fun. And the next piece in the program is another setting directly from Dante's text, which is a lovely madrigal by Merulo again, which Becky you sing, don't you?
Yes, it's Virgine Madre. So yeah, it's a kind of a hymn to the Virgin, and ends with the words, I wrote these down: "You showed us the path that leads to heaven," which I think is rather lovely. And it's a sort of quite a gentle sort of madrigal. It's kind of real contrast to the Luzzaschi you hear in the first half of the program. And it's just sort of quite serene, and with just 5 voices singing. So it's makes you look heavenward, which is rather lovely.
And again, that's in Italian, and I think that colours things so much. In the same way that you can use in the Luzzaschi, you can use all the really interesting consonants and words to make the sort of hell sounds. In this, I think the Italian text really enables you to paint some different colours for in adoration of Mary.
Yeah. And then we've got a piece by Lusitano. Do you want to tell people a little bit about Lusitano? They may not heard of him.
He was a Portuguese composer who worked in the 16th century, and we now think he's probably the first European black composer to have published music. And he's sort of had a bit of a rebirth in the last 20 years as people, or maybe not even that, 10 years probably, as people are trying to find voices and composers of more diverse backgrounds. So we thought it was important to try and include some of his music. And it's a really lovely setting of the Regina Caeli. So talking about Mary as the Queen of Heaven, which is sung, as Dante says, so sweetly. All of these things are always sung so sweetly. And it's really great fun. And it's got lots of pealing alleluias, and two parts of it mentions the resurrection, and it's just I suppose it's an Easter hymn, isn't it? So it has all of this joy of Easter. But really lovely piece, and I hope we get to do some more Lusitano in the future. I know he's done lots. There's lots more out there to be discovered.
Oh yeah, that sounds interesting. I'd like to do that as well. Yeah.
When would these pieces have been, so I'm sorry, Becky, but when would these pieces have been sung? You said it was an Easter hymn. So would it have been sung in church at Easter time? Would it have been sung outside of church? Where were these pieces experienced by people?
I think definitely in church services for the Regina Caeli, and pretty much all the music apart from the Lauda, the Venite, and the madrigals, I suppose, are church music, which I think has been an interesting thing as well, that because Dante is so Christian, that it's been really easy to find the music that we sing, which is very, very Christian as well, and dot in a few sort of profane things amongst the sacred. But yeah, it's lovely to have the contrast between the two, I think. So the final.
And then we reached the very end, and we found a rather splendid setting of the Magnificat. Again, hymn to, well, this is Mary's response to the angel Gabriel, wasn't it? And it's a 12-voice setting again, so we're taking advantage of our numbers. I mean, 3 choirs, and it's actually, I think it's great. It's got really kind of big, exciting bits, but there's also some really lovely sort of classic Victoria of smaller sections in the middle.
Yeah, it's really, really lovely that your choir in particular has all these exciting ones in triple time, which have come really fast. And then the first choir has these very lovely sort of expressive, quite long sections, which are really lovely to listen to. And then we all come together for the big moments, don't we? But yeah, this is in there because once Dante gets to heaven, he actually there's a reenactment of the Annunciation with the angel Gabriel and Mary, and so it felt like quite a good finisher for the whole program as well. But yeah, it's really, I love doing these pieces in 12 parts. I just think it's really fun. You all stood there, and you don't have to worry about who else is singing on your part, but and they're often in this sort of style. It's sort of like Gabrielli, sort of Venetian polychoral style, isn't it? So you can do lots of fun articulation, and that the composers do so much with texture as well as everything else. So the choirs build up at certain stages and things. So yeah, it's a really good end to the concert, I think.
Yeah, it's always good to finish a program on a high, having started down the depths of hell. And it's nice like that. It's a really kind of joyous ending to the whole proceedings. So I suppose we should wrap up. Is there any final thoughts from either Donovan or Joseph?
I don't think so.
I think so. I was just going to say, it's just such an amazing program for spring and Easter time. As Jonathan said, the whole thing begins on Maundy Thursday when he's lost in the wood, and it's so full of sort of metaphor. Dante as the character rather than the writer. He's lost, he's bewildered, he has no hope, he doesn't know where he's going. Which is kind of metaphorical for sort of pre-resurrection humans, if you like, or even Jesus himself. He knows he's betrayed and probably doomed, etc. And then Good Friday, obviously, Jesus is killed, the hope of the world is lost, and Dante responds by descending literally into hell, which is sort of the hopelessness of Good Friday made physical. And then it's on Easter Sunday that they emerge onto Purgatory, completely in a new world. The world is transformed through Easter Sunday, and Dante sort of shows this by they emerge on this spit of land on the far side of the world where the stars are different, souls sing, they're not punished, they're redeemed, and it's completely transformed the whole world. And then of course he goes into heaven by Easter Wednesday, I think. So it's just such an opposite program for Easter and just for spring generally, which is such a time of rebirth, resurrection, change, hope, trepidation, hard work as well. So it's just it's a very fitting program, and it's just very exciting.
Well, and thank you for all of your inspiration and hard work on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to Jonathan for putting it into this musical order. And we all think the programme is really fantastic. We've all enjoyed putting it together and working on it and performing it. So we hope you all enjoy the performance, whether you watch it in person or online. And thank you very much for supporting us.